Let's see if this works a little bit better. If you can see me, let me know. I'm sorry for this delay. This is a bizarre beginning, but I'm sort of I've got this little spinning wheel of death that's happening on the page here. So I've gone to my cell phone. We'll see if that's helped and made it a little bit better. We'll just go that route tonight. All right, yes. Perfect. Well, there we go. Thank you guys. So sorry about this weird beginning, but I see a couple folks now joining me. Adrienne and Allison and Robert, perfect. We're back up and running. Okay, so I've got a very big negative space over my head, but that's the virtue of where I am with this particular setup. Great. Kathy's here. Allison and David are here. Great to see you guys at the restaurant a little while back. Hi, Adrienne. How are you? Ooh, this is really interesting. So, Peggy and Chris, it's working for you too? Great. Perfect. We're going to go this route then. I think my computer's having a really tough connection earlier, and so I apologize for that. Trish, Andy, and Kathy are back. Hey, guys. Welcome. Delighted you're here too. And the Kestenbaums. How nice. Wonderful. Kathleen, I hope you're feeling okay. I think out of quarantine at this point. It's the world of COVID we live in, where you get next to someone who has it and you still have to quarantine, and it still affects life, but life continues on now in a different and more kind of bizarre way. Brad joining us. Thank you, sir. And Kristen, the Sanders are here. So I'm not sure how much was translated as I opened up. I said I'm excited to be here on this beautiful summer's evening to taste this unique wine. It's kind of a light wine in color, and it's a wine that somehow has a real richness and aroma, kind of a contrary dichotomy that exists perhaps with the wine. It's a wine that has an interesting profile just from the visual. So Todd, you're joining us from Florida. That's great. And the Swanbergs have joined in. That's great too. Thank you, Jeff and Adrian, for hopping in tonight. Cindy Whitmore's joining us, just checking things out. All right, well, let's work this wine. What do you see, guys? What's this wine present by way of appearance? There doesn't appear to be any bubbles. We're not talking about something sparkling. Doesn't seem to be any things floating in it. But what color do you see? What profile do you see by way of swirling the wine? Again, you're looking for the formation of where that wine swirls, and then do drips drop down that form tiers? I call them tiers. And then do they persist and hold form? I call those legs. And how long do they do that? And in what kind of shape are they? And do they go fast or slow? Those things tell you something about a wine. So as we're looking visually at this particular wine, there's a lot that we can determine from it right off the bat, just by way of looking at it. That color is really beautiful. Kind of a cranberry color. It's like a cranberry cocktail. Yeah, Dean, I'm with you. Like, there's a ruby element there. Thank you, Kristen. Slight haze. Okay, I'm not picking up much of this on the way of the haze, but there is an intensity to the kind of profile that's in the glass relative to the amount of color. Mine are sheeting, forming, and then not necessarily forming tiers. They're just sort of moving down. So there's potential for some alcohol here, even though there's not a lot of richness in the way of color, right? So sometimes when we see deep color, we expect there to be a real concentration of alcohol and weight. And so Kathy's got the wine, but not quite ready. No worries, Kathy, we'll catch you up. Yeah, Kristen, yours is sheeting fairly quickly, legs, once they form. Yep, so it may be a little bit lower in alcohol. It does seem to have some properties, though, where we might have a riper climate. So per that point, right? So maybe ripeness and those formations of tiers that stick and hold in legs is an indication of alcohol, which is an indication of potentially a ripe site, a ripe place, a ripe vintage. So all three could be at play at once. Could be a cooler site that happens to have a ripe vintage. It could be a place like, California, where you've got general ripeness compared with something like Chablis, which has a little bit more coolness, relatively speaking. So in this case, the light color would suggest a cooler climate. But I think as we're starting to see both in aroma, I mean, the aroma for me, I wasn't really smelling the wine, but it was jumping out of the glass. It smelled like gummy cherries. That kind of expression of fruit indicates perhaps more of a warmer site. So maybe what we're looking at here is a winemaking touch, right? So somebody who's doing some whole cluster work, somebody who's doing something carbonic, somebody trying to make a lighter wine out of really ripe fruit. So maybe we're looking at something like Beaujolais or a carbonically made or kind of lesser skin contacted red from somewhere that's in a warmer climate. So we'll have to see. I agree, Dean, there are no real signs of age. I mean, this is like the same way all the way through. And I saw the earlier comment about Ocean Spray. Thank you for that. It looks like cranberry juice cocktail to me. It's got like the exact color to it. So yeah, it's clear. You can see through it. So it's a light-bodied wine by way of the appearance. It's not deep and robust in that way. All right, and reddish color all the way through. It has some, almost not necessarily tears, but more like sheets coming down, which indicate a little bit less alcohol. So, but a ripish smell. So let's get to the nose. What's on the nose for you folks? Remember, we're looking for a few things: fruit, earth, and wood. Few things. On the fruit category, berries. Is it stone fruit, i.e. things with pits? Is it tree fruit, things like apples and pears? Tropical fruit, bananas, papayas, mangoes, in that category, but in its own sort of subset, it'd be citrus. And is it limes, lemons, oranges, grapefruit, anything of that sort? Where does the fruit come in? And then from that point, berries, for example, berries or cherries in this case, I think. Is it fresh? Is it dried? Tart? Is it something that's medicinal, kind of herbal? Is it something that has a cooked quality to it, a confectionery note? What state is the fruit in? That's great. Yeah, Chris, are you getting raspberry? That's very cool. Kathy, picking up berries and cherries, fresh. Yeah. So red fruit, some darkish fruit, like dark cherry, like a black cherry. Allison, are you picking up menthol? That's interesting. Yeah, there's a little bit kind of a menthol element, almost like a cherry, Luden's cough drop. That alcohol element kind of in that cough syrup quality. Great. Yeah, I get a lot of that. So from the fruit side, it's expressive. It's pretty expressive. This is not a muted or kind of stayed wine. It's got an expressive quality on the nose. Earthiness, Kathy's prompting that with a little comment there. Thank you. So from the fruit side, how about earth? A little bit of earthiness, and then a wood quality we'll get to next. But Kathy, what are you picking up that might be a little woody? There's a tiny bit of spice, right? There's a little bit of cigar box, kind of, not the cigar aroma, but more the cedar quality. Slight sulfuric element, picking up Jeff or Adrian, or both. That's nice. Yep. Which could be an indication just of something youthful here. Okay. Well, on the earth side, a little hint more of the wood than earthiness. Maybe that sulfuric element kind of being potentially earthy. Baking spices, cedar, but not really heavy. Coming from the wood side. Thank you, Kathy, for that note. I think so. I think I agree with that. It's not pronounced. I think it's not about wood, this wine. It's much more about that fruit. And perhaps as we taste it, we'll kind of get into maybe more of a winemaking choice or a series of choices that a winemaker made with relation to this particular production. So, Carol, welcome to you. Dean, a little cardamom, nice. Similar to the comment about menthol, but cardamom might be more of a kind of an indication too of some wood being here and a level of it. Power of suggestion, and there's that carbon pod, so thank you. Yes. Chris, I like the idea of sap. So there's a tree element there, but it's got concentrated sugars coming from that tree, so a woodiness, but a sweet wood element, huh? That's great. So with your first sip, remember just to get kind of an impression, an initial impression. Let yourself draw conclusions in the subconscious and see if you can elevate them from that subconscious to your conscious and bring them forward. What do you think it might be? Especially those of you who've been tasting for a while, you're going to have a built-up taste memory, and this might jog one of those memories. The olfactory sense and the tasting experience is extremely powerful from a memory standpoint. So does this remind you of another wine that you've tried? And if so, pay attention to it. Don't get trapped there. Sometimes we taste something and then all of a sudden, boom, I'm only going to be able to taste that going forward. But what does it maybe remind you of? And then go from that point. Yes, and then the second kind of thing you should do is maybe take another taste, or if you still have enough residual to think about it in another way, focus on the taste as opposed to the flavor. And when I say that, I mean, is it a dry wine? So is there residual sugar here? What's the tannin like? Where does the acidity sit? And how does it sit in your palate? Is it a wine like whole milk? Does it have the texture of whole milk? Does it have the texture of 2% milk? Does it have the texture of 1%? A lot of you are noting, just as I also personally noted, that there's a lot of like juicy fruit on the front. And then it's dry, right? It's not, there's no lingering residual sugar, but the ample quality of the fruit up front kind of almost makes you think it might be. Wow. But then that finish, huh? There's a real, vervy, zesty kind of acidity. It's bright. It's tart. There's sometimes an acidity that just sort of lays in within the wine and illuminates the wine a bit and lifts it and makes it a little bit bright. This one has all that ample fruit up front, and then there's a zing to the finish that is just, makes you kind of pucker a little bit and makes you want another sip, which is a really compelling part of this wine. So a dry wine, pretty ample fruit. We have, I'd say, I don't think this presents as light as the color shows. It's kind of light to medium as opposed to just a light-bodied wine. It has very low tannins, as the Swanbergs are pointing out. The tannins are there, maybe a hint of them, but they're pretty soft. Kristen's saying skim to 1%. Yeah, I think that's it. It's got this light-ish body. It doesn't sheet like water. It has a little viscosity and it has a volume to it without that being very dense. And the tannins are really subtle, and they're not really completely part of the whole experience of tasting, right? So they're there, but kind of linger at the end a little bit, and they're barely perceptible with relation to, say, the pronounced quality of fruit and the vervy acidity. So Allison's question about the acidity, is it because of the newness? I don't think so. I think this is just the wine itself. Kathy's note too about there being a little bit of an underripe quality of some of the fruit, an underripe strawberry note. So what we might be dealing with is a little range of pick, or a pick where some of the fruit was very ripe, some of the fruit was underripe. There's just a quality here that has this brightness that's pretty different. Adrian, you're jumping to Bordeaux? All right. So yeah, well, let's talk about potential varietals here. We have, as a recap, right, we saw a lighter bodied wine in color with a reddish character that sheeted on particular legs, so a little lighter in body. It presents that way in the palate. It gives you a medium kind of low, light to medium, but more light body and profile. It has a lot of fruit, and it's reddish fruit. So if it was Bordeaux, it would be a unique Bordeaux in that you would normally get a little bit more richness and darkness. You'd get a little more texture and tannin. So I wouldn't be readily heading toward Bordeaux. I mean, a place like Entre deux Mers or something like that, where you could get a lighter expression of Bordeaux, but I think you'd still get a little bit more power, and you'd get a little bit more depth. Malbec, this could be a variation on Malbec, but we have definitely tried Malbec that has a darker, much darker, inkier black and kind of really rich profile. I don't know about Malbec. Again, I think if this is a wine that's made with kind of a winemaker's intention to make a lighter wine and focus on not as much extraction, then it's a possibility. Dean's pointing out that's not a Bordeaux bottle shape, which helps. You can certainly play that part of the game, right? Gamay, it could be Gamay. I mentioned that in the beginning from a Beaujolais standpoint. I think this has more texture than Gamay, but there's a possibility. I think we should keep that in there. Kathy, you're going New World. And there's not a level of rusticity there for her, and that's where she's kind of venturing then to the New World. I get that. Todd, Nebbiolo, I think from the color, no doubt you would want to consider Nebbiolo, the reddish fruit, but then it doesn't present the tannin that you might find from Nebbiolo, and it would have to be a very soft Nebbiolo structurally, and I don't get any kind of that floral note. Cabernet Franc, I think this could be an interesting Cabernet Franc. If Julie put a Cabernet Franc in after last week's Cabernet Franc, this would not be from the same place, although last month's Cabernet Franc from Chinon, that was quite a departure for me. I didn't get any of that pyrazine element, which led me fully away, and in fact I declared that it wasn't Chinon or something from the Loire Valley. How wrong was I? So Cabernet Franc, Pinot Noir. Yeah, we have to consider that, Robert. I mean, from the lightness side of things, it's presenting that reddish fruit character. We have to think about Pinot and where from. We'll come back to that. So Gamay and Pinot. Zinfandel, Robert Duke's thrown out there. It's a good question. I think there's a chance that I've been trying some really cool Zinfandels. We're going to pour one next week at our wine dinner. So a Zinfandel blend that's been made intentionally light. Carbonic maceration, which refers to the idea that when you take the grapes, you put them into a tank and you put carbon dioxide in that tank and close the tank. And the pressure in that tank over time allows the skins of the grapes to kind of sever and pop. And fermentation, the yeast that's in the outside of the skins, gets in contact with the sugar, the fruit that's inside of the grapes, and begins the fermentation. And the juices kind of trickle along the outsides of the grapes, leaving less of a pressed, macerated quality, and you just get a slight color that comes from it, and you get kind of a ripe, fruity quality to a wine. So, Todd, you have a chill on it, and you're getting a lot of tannin. Wow. Here's the color. Again, Sylvia. Yeah, this is a wine that has total red kind of color. You can basically see through it. I don't know if you can see through in Reedfield, Maine. That would be pretty cool. But you can see my hand kind of through it. There's a real quality of a bright, vibrant, like we said earlier, almost cranberry juice look to this. Kristen decanted an hour ago, and it's pretty open. I'm not getting any of that tannin that you're getting, Todd, so that's interesting. That would take me to a different place in terms of my guess. So if we depart because of that, I understand. Gamay, Pinot Noir, Zinfandel, Malbec on the lighter side of things. Yeah, he chilled his wine. Kathy is asking the question. Very young Norton. That's cool, Sylvia. Yeah. Yep. I mean, why not? Ample fruit. Oftentimes it's a little bit darker fruit than the red fruit, but for sure. I mean, you thinking of like Sarah's Patio Red, for example, which would have a little bit of sweetness, or traditionally has had a little sweetness. I haven't tasted that in a little while from Chrysalis. That might be kind of an example of a Norton that is meant to be kind of enjoyed without a super amount of extraction. So a lot of the color, all the color you get from wine and grapes with the exception of a couple grapes, is from the contact of the skins with the juice that you press from those grapes. And this is an example perhaps where we might have, let's take Zinfandel for example, that the Zinfandel has the potential to make something pretty inky and black and rich and powerful depending on the site, but you can also not spend as much time with the juice pressed from those those grapes on the skins, extracting that color and the tannin and the profile. That's a great point that Kathy and Todd are making back and forth. When you chill a wine, you mute flavor, but you can increase the expression of tannin. You can decrease the kind of profile or experience of alcohol. So temperature matters when you're talking about wine, and where you're consuming it matters, and the ambient temperature as well as the wine's actual temperature. And so if you're drinking a wine that's 65 degrees, that's a little warm, but if it's 100 degrees outside and you're tasting it, it'll taste relatively chilled. If you're in a 45 degree environment and drinking a 55 degree wine, that's directly where it's supposed to be, but that might be cold because the whole area around it and in is cold. So this is a short finish. Thank you, Dean, for prompting that. Yeah. And I think that's kind of where I'm headed, where you're headed, Todd. A hot climate Pinot. There's ripeness, it's red. It is a little short. There's a volume to this. I don't know if this has like a Zinfandel character. It's got more Pinot-like character than Zinish character, unless it's manipulated. And the manipulation is the carbonic or elements where you're just whole cluster pressing lightly, no soaking the skins with the juice, no trying to extract. That's a possibility. That would be a difficult thing to taste for in a blind tasting. And I mean, Julie could do that to us. That'd be pretty cool if she did. But it would generally be something that'd be hard to kind of test and know. Adrian, Tony is saying, you're saying Tony is guessing Lambrusco. That'd be kind of neat. Yeah. No spritz, no bubble. So not a Lambrusco with bubble, but if it was a still Lambrusco. And there's no residual sugar here. And there's like a little tannin that exists on Lambrusco usually too. And I'm not picking that up. I know mine's a little bit warmer than some, and so maybe that would be part of the contributing factor, but Okay, so talking about Pinot Noir, Gamay, Zinfandel, there was Malbec and Bordeaux blend kind of put out there. Are we going New World or Old World? And as you guys respond to that idea, I know Kathy already threw out that she was looking at the New World. David has asked, how can you tell if it's a ripe fruit? It's the perception you're having of the fruit. So does the flavor profile and the aroma profile, all the olfactory sense expression of our olfactory sense perception of this wine, is the fruit presenting in a ripe fashion? And to put that in context, right? Is it a tart cherry? Is it a ripe, perfectly delicious, ripe, ready to eat raw cherry? Is it cherry jam? Is it Luden's cough drop cherry, kind of medicinal cherry? Is it a cherry candy gummy cherry? So there's this range of that. And so how does it present? And that's how you would tell which you're describing the fruit quality of, or the character of the fruit being somewhere on that spectrum. And that kind of helps you determine where you're headed in the world, generally speaking. So if you say tart cherry and then you say, but I think it's a super ripe, warm climate wine, those two things don't mesh so much as opposed to saying I get gummy cherry and I think it's a warm climate. So yes, most of you are chiming in on New World. All of you are. Todd's thrown out Russian River Valley, Santa Barbara. Nice. I think that's cool. I like that. Sea Smoke. Boy, would Julie be in trouble if she bought Sea Smoke and sold it for $30 a bottle. If we could even get Sea Smoke. Sea Smoke's a pretty popular collectible Pinot Noir from the coast, Russian River Valley typically. And Dean, yeah, New World, it's because of this fruit and this ripeness and this roundness, this lack of rusticity. The acidity is one thing that you've heard us talk about before, where we say that acidity might take us to the old world, but there's a simplicity to this wine. I don't mean that in a negative fashion. I'm not getting, we went from fruit to wood. We skipped earth mostly, and the wood wasn't real pronounced. It was much more about ripe fruit, and that ripe fruit traditionally would come from a riper kind of place, and that riper place comes generally by way of warmth, and generally speaking, the New World presents warmth. Not all of it, of course. I mean, you can talk about the Finger Lakes region of New York. It's not a super warm, zone. But somewhere on the New World side, which is why I would kind of, if we're considering Gamay from Beaujolais, for example, I've tasted them and there's a little bit more of an earthy component, and it's not here. So I would be like, all right, well, Gamay from California. Pinot Noir is this Burgundy. Not really. It doesn't have sort of that grip and some of the edges that you might associate with Burgundy. It's more New World, and I'm kind of, I think I'm planting myself sort of in California in the New World. I mean, there's just a ripeness here, and a little less coastal, so there's not that sea spray element or that saltiness, that minerality, that earthen component that I'm picking up. So I'm thinking more inland. That's why this Santa Barbara is an interesting idea, but maybe we're further inland, Monterey kind of inland, San Luis Obispo, sort of Central Valley, but Central Valley doesn't grow much in the way of Pinot Noir. We have to be semi-coastal, but more inland from the coast. Beaujolais Gamay, kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's simple. Carmenere, Sylvia, generally, I think we get more structure, a little more tannin, and potentially more pyrazine. Todd, thank you. Paso, for sure. Paso Robles could be an example here where you're going to get that ripeness. Dean's coming on with that too. Exactly. So I kind of skirted right around Paso, and that would be where you find ripe Pinot Noir and an expressiveness this way, that ripe fruit. Chris, yeah, higher alcohol. We picked up a little bit of alcohol off the nose and off the palate right off the beginning when we were talking about the wine having that medicinal element, that syrup, cough droppy kind of quality. Robert, you're coming in with Pinot Noir from Monterey, Paso Robles, Santa Barbara area? I think so. So like south of San Francisco for sure, but probably south of Carmel, Monterey. And in that zone, Central Coast, larger AVA Central Coast, but more inland perhaps. We're not talking about like Oceano and Rachel make this wonderful Pinot Noir from a vineyard that's right on the coast, and there's just so much more precision in that wine. It's got more angles to it. It has a similar amount of acidity, but it's got this kind of less kind of lumbering fruit element. So this is a wine that I think might come from a tiny bit more inland, where you're going to get a bit more warmth. We all indicated that this was something that had a lot of acidity and that ripeness of fruit and a relative amount of youth, right? As you look at the color here, there's not a gradation or variation at all between the rim and the center. And so a younger wine. So I'm going to say 2020, so 2 years old, 2020 Pinot Noir from the Central Coast of California. Anybody else want to lob something else in the mix? Los Olivos, Happy Canyon, cool. Yeah, that's a great idea. So Central Coast Pinot Noir 2020. Let's see what we got. Ooh, it's called Fredo from Field Recordings. They make really fun wines. And Sangiovese. Very cool. Okay, so a lighter bodied expression. I did not call, obviously, Sangiovese, but 100% Paso Robles. That's pretty cool, guys. So we picked up on place and the expression of place. It's carbonic macerated Sangiovese. First note, if you read on the label here, don't even think about judging this wine by its color. Get out of your comfort zone, throw the bottle in the fridge, enjoy it chilled. Yep, you read that right. When the text turns blue, you know what to do. Oh, neat. So you can chill this bottle and the text will turn blue and that tells you it's ready to go. Isn't that the Coors Light bottle or cans that have that changing logo that changes when it's just chilled right? Huh. Very cool. 52 barrels, so not a huge production. Serve it chilled. That's really neat. Yeah, strawberry jello shooter. That's fantastic. I mean, I got that kind of cherry gummy thing. This is a happy wine. It's a perfect wine for today. You sit outside for the rest of the day, throw it in a nice bucket and go for it. Yeah, the color, you know what, Sylvia, you're right. I mean, the color, I didn't look at the color too. Sangiovese sometimes throws off I'm looking down. As light goes through it, you look at the base of whatever that's reflecting against, and it's best against a white surface. It'll throw something orangish in cast. Sangiovese can kind of give you an orange cast. So, yes, cheers to Julie. Jeff and Adrian, I agree. She threw us a kind of a curve there. I mean, it's a fair curve. It's a single varietal from a single place, but there's not a lot of context for that. I think they did make this in a very light fashion intentionally, clearly. They didn't look to extract a whole bunch. I mean, think about Chianti Classico Riserva that has the blackish color and you get kind of almost a raisiny note to it. Very different expression. They may have had the option to make a wine like that, but this is a great one. So cool fun for the rest of this bottle, and for those of you that have a remaining portion, cheers and have a great night. This is going to go chilled, and I don't think it'll stay at this level. So I look forward to seeing some of you in the coming days at the restaurant, and hopefully the rest of you, or all of you, as we gather again in September for another iteration. The wine dinners are back. We're going to do one a month or so. We have a fun one coming up that I think some of you are already signed up for, just doing some summer sippers, things like this. And then in September, we have a few spaces left at our Valtellina dinner. I'm just fascinated with this northwestern area in Italy and wanted to spend some time tasting those wines, and may have bought too many. Like, there's 10 wines we're going to try in that evening. We'll do 8 in the first sort of seminar setting, and then we'll just drink 2 Rossos for fun throughout a little bit of dinner. And then in October for Virginia Wine Month, and to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Early Mountain Vineyards, we will do an Early Mountain focused dinner. And the wines from this year, as they have been each year, are getting more and more compelling and interesting, and it will just be a lot of fun to sit down. I believe Eileen's going to join us up at the restaurant. So a few things to look for on the horizon by way of wine beyond this third Thursday experience. But to all of you, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Have a great night.